to this. Don't worry about, no, everyone write down the Gettysburg Address. We got to do in your notes, Gettysburg Address. So the Gettysburg Address. Let's talk a little bit about this. Because this speech, okay, the speech, whatever. But what, and leave out the documents. I'm going to refer to this. So leave this, the worksheet out for just a second. So, the Gettysburg Address. And in the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln lays out the cause. Lincoln lays out the cause for the war. Why we're doing this. The cause. He lays it out. And it's changed. It was for union. And don't forget, when Lincoln was elected president, he was no abolitionist. He was a free soiler. He didn't like slavery, but by no means did he believe in equality. In fact, Lincoln was for colonization. The idea being that if the United States never did get rid of slavery, the freedmen would be sent to Africa. And he thought that as late as 1862. In fact, over 4,000 freedmen, people who had ran away to freedom, the United States, under Lincoln's order, put them in ships and sent them down here to a little island off of Haiti to begin colonization. It was a disastrous thing. And so that was Lincoln in 1862. There's no talk of equality. And in 1863, he's talking about an entirely new thing. People can change their views. The war changed a lot of people. People can progress. People can regress. They can change. We are not stuck in time. You're never not. You don't have to be the same person for that. Oh, I think we all are. So, what's 87 years ago? What document is he referring to? The Declaration of Independence. The founding document of the United States. And why is this important? It's a founding document of the U.S. But what other place considered it their founding document too? Who? Who? Yeah, the Confederacy. The Confederates claimed it too. Hey, who's the main author of the Declaration of Independence? We should all remember this. Thomas Jefferson, a slaveholder from Virginia, who seceded from the Union. The Confederates, actually, they would say, we are following the founders. The United States is infringing on our rights, and that's why we left the Union. Hey, let's review. Which, by the way, you will have to answer a short ID. We're having a conversation back here. You have to answer a short ID on the Gettysburg or the Declaration of Independence on the planet. And let's see if we remember. All of you should. First off, what year? 1876. All of you should know that. And all these truths be self-evident, and all men are created equal, and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, which are, what are the three rights? Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And this is what Lincoln is doing. You might claim the Gettysburg Address. I'm sorry, you might claim the Declaration of Independence. But no, that's the founding document of the United States. And we are the United States. You have betrayed the Declaration of Independence. You have betrayed our founding fathers. And so what he's doing is, he is claiming the Declaration of Independence for the Union and not the Confederacy. And therefore, this is what we have to get. He is claiming that the founding fathers of the United States are the founding fathers of the United States and not the Confederacy. The Confederacy has betrayed the founding fathers. Now, don't forget, it was written by a slaveholder from Virginia. So Lincoln is using history to his advantage, which people do all the time. That's how we shape our today. We shape our future is by looking at the past. It's hard not to look at tumbleweeds, tumble one box. I'm just worried when a car or a freshman will come along. But sorry, no. We are the true patriots. The North of the Patriots and the Confederacy of Traitors. And it's our document. So Lincoln is making a document that was written just basically to try to say, okay, this is why we leave Britain. And making it the founding document, truly the founding document. And what important part? That question number 2, it says, Lincoln is testing. What is Lincoln testing? Let's look at it real quick. What is Lincoln testing? Yeah. What kind of nation? Based upon what 2 big things he said? You're right. That's one of them. Liberty and what? It says right here. Liberty and dedicate the proposition that all men are created equal. Very good. Liberty and equality. Are we going to be a nation based upon liberty and equality, or going to be a nation with the Confederates? That's it. What kind of nation are we going to be? And if we're not the nation that based on liberty and equality, who won? Or more importantly, who lost? Fathers lost too, didn't they? We all lost. It's over. Now, that's the man who believed in colonization. A year later, he's talking liberty and equality. He has widened the wall. It's going to be for something better. And this is the big thing we have to get there. That means the country in the past, the country before the Civil War, it's gone. And we have to make a new country. And they have a term for it. Does anybody know what they call the era after the Civil War? That's where you write down Reconstruction. We're going to have to make a new country. When people in the United States talk about what's great about the United States, they look to the U.S. that was created after the Civil War. That's what they look to. It's a different country. Oh, sure. Lincoln was able to trying to fulfill the words of all men being created equal. Unalienable rights. But it would be created in 1866, 1867, not 1776. And it would not be a complete job, which we'll get to. So, that's what we're creating. And let's move on just a little bit further. It says, what task lies ahead? If you look down to the 4th line, it says, it is rather for us to be dedicated to the great task remaining before us. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. That from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. What is the task remaining before us? If the United States is going to create the country that the founders want, based upon liberty and equality, what's the task remaining before us in November of 1863? Huh? Yeah, a lot more to the vote. What we got to do for that, even though, yeah, voting might be part of it, but got to fight and what? Win. We got to win. We got to win. If we don't win, what are you doing? What are you doing? I just saw you going like this. We got to fight and win. We got to win. If we don't win, what happens? We'll be let down. Not just the founding fathers, who else? They are just dedicating a cemetery right there. We are not. They're letting down every single person. Founding fathers, all the way to that war. If we don't win, we let them all down. Everybody of sacrifice, we let everyone down. We're not to the spot that we all. We let them all down. That's just not what failures. It never happened again. It's worth nothing. Our last minute. Gotta win. Gotta win. Period. We gotta win. Or we won't have the country based on the fall. Hey, what's the last full measure of devotion? Silence. Now, most people think death, and I think, yeah, but it's more than that. Okay, I've seen this many times. Many times I've watched the videos, so well done. And they show that reunion. A couple scenes always get me. The one that always gets me. The 1913 reunion, they show that she's on a few little clips. You know the one? The guy washing his face. The one I'm talking about? So we assume his arm got hit with a battle. Exploding shell, canister, bullet, had to get amputated. Right? Washing his face. You probably hit here. I don't know. He's hit here. Not far. Not far. Right? That far from being this. Why was he alive in anything? What? And why did he lose an arm? And maybe the guy next to him wasn't hit at all, and the guy behind him was killed. Why? Why is someone dying in battle, especially if that war gets more and more death? Weapons get more and more horrific. Why do some people live and some people don't? Why are some people more horribly wounded and some not wounded, at least physically? Why? It's kind of luck, isn't it? Just pure, unadulterated luck. Doesn't matter how good of a soldier you are, doesn't matter how good you are, doesn't matter if you're good and moral and just for the sake, or a jerk. Doesn't matter. The shell is full of your mind. Did he get the last full measure? He was there. He about made the sacrifice. Did Lincoln get the last full measure? Okay, those of us who have read history know that he the assassin. We know he did. He thought he had enough. We know we had this. Think about the family back home. Did they get the last full measure? Yeah. What's happening? See, doesn't matter. The point of the reunion, it didn't matter. So, at the end of the 3-day reunion, which the Army set it up, they set up tents for the veterans. Some are being quite old. So on Cemetery Ridge was a stone wall where the Union forces stood behind where they repelled Pickett's charge. And they reenacted Pickett's charge, where they had about 10,000 of the Union veterans get behind the wall. The wall was about this high. Then it was about this high. It's kind of been, people took rocks and souvenirs. So the wall is kind of shrunk. Not anymore, really. So, they had Union there, and the Confederate forces started about 100 yards, and they were going to march towards the wall. Nobody was really sure what was going to happen. There was going to be like maybe a handshake or something like that. You know, who knows? They started marching. They tried, some of them tried to do the rebel yell, and a bunch of 75-year-olds trying to do this. And then when they got to about 30 yards away, walking slowly, oh, Union forces couldn't take it. They started with one or two, pretty soon all of them climbed over the wall and started happening. They just couldn't take it. And what? They embraced, they hugged. Oh, we can't do it anymore. We don't want to reenact this horrible battle. And that kind of sums up this whole thing where it doesn't matter what something is. But what kind of country we have? So, this is why this speech is so important. It lays out the cause, which we have to know, not only because, hey, we have to know this. You're being an American citizen or adult. It makes a great short ID, doesn't it? So, why were we fighting this war? What kind of country are we going to base it on? Country based upon what two things? I told you, but we went over before. What? Liberty and equality. Everyone got that? Liberty and equality. If we do not have a country based upon liberty and equality, who have we let down? Founding fathers all the way through who? All the way through today, isn't it? All the way through today, of everyone who made that sacrifice. If we do not have a country based upon liberty and equality, then we've let everybody down. We have failed not just ourselves, we have failed everybody in our past. We failed our history of what made America great, or not great. And I'm not saying we're based upon liberty and equality now forward, but let's say we were. it can still go away. And if it goes away, be lost. And I will give you examples. Many where they thought we now have rights and they were going to be taken away from freedmen, especially from women, from other immigrants, like that. And you can really source the more economic. Really, if you can still do this. That's what we have to know, and that will make it very short. It's a great speech. Great speech. All right, you have to know this. So, this will be one of the short IDs you have to do on Declaration of Independence. You have to do this. You have to do. You have to know the rights of the Declaration of Independence. You have to know this. Why is Gettysburg Address important? Because it laid out the cause. If you can't do that, I weighed in more. This is kind of a big deal. Bacon Rebellion will be another big deal. All right, so let's go ahead and take your that's Gettysburg Address. Let's get back to our notes. Regular book. This I just want to show you the picture here. Here's the grave of Stonewall Jackson Farm. Yes, there's a grave, and to this day, lost causers for the Confederacy still put Confederate battle flags around Stonewall Jackson's grave. That's in mourning it back in 1863. I told you about the first Minnesota that lost 83% of their men. That was in the video. I told you how they did a bayonet charge. That's their statue of Gettysburg, Minnesota. And it's one of the tallest monuments there, of regimental monuments. And very fitting. This statue, the road down from Little Round Top, and that's where you go. That's the boulder where Governor P. Warren, General Warren was. When he signaled the 20th Maine to come up to Little Round Top. That's where I made a little kid cry. Yes. And that is the regimental monument for my great-great-great-grandfather's regiment on Culp's Hill. And there's a monument of a similar picture like this at Antietam. There's one all the way down to Petersburg. He was there for the whole thing. And he made it. And I went there, I took this picture, this is about 8 years ago. When I took this picture, so I went down with my dad, and my dad was in his early 80s. And my brother is 2 years older than me, and his son, my nephew, who's now in graduate school. And so, to show you, here we are, all in front of it. That's me and my dad and yes, now he's in grad school. Then he was like a sophomore in school. Don't I look cool? My brother doesn't. I do great. Right, moving on. So, 1864. That's the way the front looked. Lincoln's now talking about, and he knows, but he never dreamed how bad it would be, but knew. It's going to get so much more blood. Something horrific is going to happen in modern war. In the end, sometimes it's so much more often. Even when he's already kind of decided who's going to win. If you know anything about World War II, you know what I'm talking about. Throw the river, Meade's army is right there, and the Confederacy. Jefferson Davis is still president, and they still got to hold out. But now they got to hold out for the election in the North. The election in 1864, because if Lincoln is not, and the Republicans aren't reelected, South can still win. They can still win this war after Gettysburg and Virginia. And Davis was a real weakness. He could not persuade states to help. And it really hurt when you had this vague idea of states' rights. It led to a disunified Confederacy. Nobody really knew what states' rights really was. What did it even mean? And what had been in reality was pro-slavery. So, for example, Georgia would be infamous. Georgia would be infamous for not helping the Confederates. Same with North Carolina. In fact, North Carolina troops would be mocked in the Army of Northern Virginia for not standing and fighting, kind of a symbol of this disunified Confederacy. In fact, the joke was in in the Army of Northern Virginia that North Carolina regiments would fight. And the only way to get them to fight, you have to put tar on their heels to stick them to the ground when they run away. Now, North Carolina will later turn that around and say, we were so brave, it's like we had tar on our heels. Thus, they became known as the Tar Heel State. Those who know anything about like college athletics, North Carolina's, they're nicknamed the Tar Heels. But it was actually an insult at first. They also had massive runaway inflation. If you don't have a system that can guarantee the value of your currency, the financial system of a nation will fall apart. And they didn't have a tax system. And so all they could do is just print more money. And their money was worthless. So, and I don't mean moderate inflation of a country that controls its money supply. Like the inflation the United States had because of supply shortages caused by COVID. 2021, inflation got about average, overall inflation was about 8%. 8% price increases from the previous year, which was higher than it's been since 1980.
Good morning, staff and students. Pardon the interruption. Staff, I just sent you an email. Students, just please listen up. We are going to have an early release today. That's at 1 o'clock. Due to high winds and the expectation that the gusts could get worse this afternoon. So once again, we will have an early release at 1 o'clock.
Out in the open.
As far as lunch, if you're staying on campus, please stay inside for lunch today. So if you are a student that likes to go outside, eat lunch just out in the grass, whatever, please stay inside. Once again, if you're not heading somewhere else for lunch. As far as those of you riding the bus, or waiting for a ride at 1 o'clock, please plan on just staying inside and watching for the bus to show up or for your ride to arrive, rather than just hanging around outside. So once again, students, early release, 1 o'clock. So after lunchtime, everybody will go to their fifth period, and then at 1 o'clock, we'll have that early release. Buses will be showing up at 1 o'clock. And as I instructed earlier, if you're waiting for your ride or waiting for your bus, please just stay inside and wait for that vehicle or bus.
Maybe you don't want first graders.
If you have any other questions, feel free to ask your teacher. I just sent them some details, and staff, just a reminder, we'll just have a real quick staff meeting at lunchtime in the back of the library. Thank you.
We might get some major damage today. There might be some trees coming down. Yeah. Don't be psychotic. All right, let's finish this. One instance. I'm actually really surprised, but I really am surprised. I'm surprised you're doing this. I got no. Huh? I got no. Well, whatever's going to happen is, I'm sure some classes you'll be forced to make up whatever you had to do in sixth period on your own. So that will be no fun for you. Period, I have a test, so I'll probably if my class will have to make that up. That's life, right?
Yep.
The heck with them. I'm gonna make them work even harder too.
Yeah.
So let's go back. They have inflation. Let's move on. So the North, three big laws would be passed in the North. Oh, I didn't tell you. Let me finish one thing about inflation. Let me finish. The inflation rate was 8% in 2021, which is unusually high. In 1980, it was 20%. But they had what's called hyperinflation. By the end of 1864, prices were going up 100% every day. Every day. So what's their money worth? Yeah, the money's worthless. Similar thing happened in Germany in 1923, happened in Venezuela like now. It's called hyperinflation. Gotta have a tax system. Okay, three big laws. Homestead we talked about, Transcontinental Railroad we talked about. Morrill Act set up, everybody write down land grant colonies. Land grant colonies. And it's set up through government. The sale of government land will pay for a major university in every state, but they must have an agricultural component. So an ag school in that college. So Montana has a land grant college. What is the Montana College? One of our major colleges that has the agricultural school in the state. Yeah, Montana State University. Most states, it's the state universities, the Morrell Grant or the land grant college. These states are a little different, like Texas, it's Texas A&M, for example. A&M means agricultural note. So, but there's massive debt. Remember, the government issues bonds, but the bonds, at least the financial system in the US is more stable. But there's still inflation. You know, the government's scooping up everything, so prices back home, like for whether it's going to be food or clothing, can be really expensive because the government's buying everything for war. Every war there's going to be inflation. But it's only about 20% a year, not 100% a day. 20% a year is a lot. World War I, it was about 25%. They did much better in World War II. The US would also begin to print, it's called fiat currency, just backed by Texas. And it's called the Legal Tender Act. They just happen to have a lot of green ink. So they printed the currency green to be different from the old currency. And that's why money today is green, or at least more green. It was just cheap. That was basically the reason. Green ink was cheap because they needed all the blue ink. So, this is Lincoln just printing money. People said this would lead to runaway inflation. That's not the way it happens. It's much more complex than that. But there's this loyalty in the United States, or in the North, in the United States. There were about half the Democrats were copperheads. Well, and they also sometimes called themselves peace Democrats. They want to end the war, meaning the Confederates won. So don't think of it in terms of pro-Confederacy as more like allowing the Confederacy to survive. We can't win, they can leave. And they would wear a penny on their lapel. Pennies back then, but you just whipped them pennies. But they used to be made out of copper. They wear a penny to show they were copperheads, so copperheads. Republicans would say they're like a snake you can trust. Copperhead, like a snake. And what are pennies made of now, even the look of pennies? Yeah, zinc. It talks about zinc. Yeah, zinc head's kind of cool. All right. But the big thing is Lincoln is going to make a big decision. We're jumping right to here. In 1864, Lincoln picked Grant to be the overall commander of all Union forces. And eventually he was a major general, 2 stars. Within his 3rd star, lieutenant general. The US hasn't had a lieutenant general since Washington. Now the highest ranking general is a 4-star or just simply general. That's the highest ranking officer. In World War II, they created 5-star generals, but they've all since passed. So, Grant. And Grant has one job to do, and this is the #1 task of the North. Hey, we got to win the war by the election of 1864. So the race is on. Can the Confederates hold out to the election? Or can the North at least make it look like we're going to win? Got to make it look like the US will win. Because if Lincoln and the Republicans lose, the Confederacy survives and the US is done. The US will not survive. At least of anything that we know is the US. And I like this picture. It's a photograph of Grant getting his portrait taken. So you can see this holding his head steady. So it doesn't move because the shutter speed is so slow. And Grant, a very capable commander. In fact, that March, when he was appointed, would be the first time him and Lincoln met. And he never went back west or went back east. So, I know, the wind is bad. By the way, them closing school makes me even more worried. If they're talking about 150-mile-per-hour winds in Shelby, is that what you said? They always get worse in here, but Great Falls might be blowing off the map. The garden spot of Montana. Okay, so Union forces at Chattanooga. Grant would lead that under General Sherman, the most capable officer in the United States Army, and they must destroy Confederate forces in front of the line. Meade in the Army of the Potomac must destroy Lee's army in front of Richmond. Grant, knowing that Meade had the most difficult and important task, and also he knew Meade was a very good general, but cautious. Grant's command rode with Meade. So Grant's headquarters will be with Meade's headquarters. So Meade will run the army, the basic tactics. Grant will do the strategic, like you'll attack here, the movements of the whole army. So they worked together. Sometimes you see it Grant versus Lee. Meade was there too. There's 3 other efforts. Oh, Henry Halleck, the old commander, would be made like chief of staff, back at the rear. So back to this. There would be 3 other attacks. Just listen. Attack to take Mobile, failed miserably. Attack to get south of Richmond, cut off the rail lines, failed miserably. Attack in the Shenandoah Valley, failed miserably. But all that mattered were the 2 big, Meade, Sherman. So let's do the Eastern Theater really quick. Meade. A massive tumbleweed just blew up. I know, and I'm giving you a bad time for looking. I apologize. I can't help looking at you. And that guy just about lost his hand. He's now walking like this. So this is the same spot of where the battlefield was. Other battlefields. Here's Fredericksburg, the battle we've had. Chancellorsville, Big Wilderness, the Rappahannock and Rapidian rivers. Meade had about 110 to 115,000 men encamped up here. Lee down to 60,000 men, and the Confederates were seriously running out of men. Right here. Meade's plan, early May, when the spring runoffs begin to go down, march through the forest, kind of like Hooker at Chancellorsville, get through the forest, fight here. Lee, knowing that in open ground, Meade will be able to use his massive superiority in men. So Lee counterattacks in the forest. The forest is called the Wilderness, and so a bloody 3-day fight, 5th through the 7th, called the Battle of the Wilderness. And this would be considered one of the bloodiest battles of the war, if not for the fact of what's coming. 3 days of really confusing fighting. It's really heavily forested, so they couldn't really see where the whole army was. At one spot in the line, the Union forces almost won complete victory. South of that, the Confederates almost won complete victory. It was a really difficult, awful battle. At the end of the day, neither side won. Both took horrible losses. And the night of the 6th and the 7th, the forest caught fire. Calm down, everybody. And the forest caught fire. And there were thousands of wounded men caught. And survivors of this war talk about this and it would be in their nightmares for the rest of their lives. They could hear men screaming in absolute terror as the fire got closer and they couldn't do anything else with wounded. And they would go out in the middle of the night, like here they are with a makeshift stretcher. William Ward's cartoon, they mentioned in the video. But hundreds of men would be burned alive. They would talk about this for years afterwards. How awful that was. The Wilderness was a nightmare. There's going to be nearly 30,000 casualties in less than 2.5 days of fighting, but over 18,000. Now, why are the numbers important? It looked like another horrible battle, no clear victor, but probably a Union loss. It looked like another Union defeat. And remember, we had a battle, they go back behind the lines, remember how we kind of did that, another battle 3 months later? And that's what it kind of looked like after this battle, another defeat. And so, here's what happened. After the 7th, going into the 8th, that night, so think about, sun has gone down on the south. General Meade, Grant's an overall command, orders the furthest North Corps to begin pulling out of the line, march down the Orange Turnpike. And the men all assume that they're going to make a left turn, go back north and back into camp. But if they make a right turn, that means they're going south, and they're going to fight another battle in 1 or 2 days. They all know that. Left turn, we're going north. Yeah, left turn. Right turn, we're going south and into battle. I want to make sure I was actually going north and south. So when those men got to that point, there was a Meade staff officer. Think about it, pitch black. And there's a member of Meade staff, an officer holding a torch. He's just going to point to the men. We're trying to be silent. And when they got to that line, he pointed back, which meant to the men south. And they all knew in a day or two, we're going to fight again. Could be worse in the wilderness where they have 30,000 casualties. They all do. We're going to do it again now. And what do the men do when we realize they kind of ripple, they kind of whisper down the line? They broke out into a cheer. They all started screaming huzzah, which was kind of the Union cheer. They had to run down the line and shut them up because the Confederates knew they were moving. They were so happy because they know they might die in a day, but they're going to end the war and maybe go home. And that's why they were so happy, and that's why they had respect for Grant, because they knew Grant gave me that order. We're going to end this war. We're going to end it. The sooner we end it, the sooner we're home. That's huge. We're going to end this war. Now the race is on. The race is on. It's who can get to the next road junction. And we're coming to a very important concept. It's called interior lines. And this is a little bit something I've explained to you about war. It's a reason why armies on the defensive have such a big advantage. So I'm going to draw the Confederacy. And I know what you're thinking, and you're partially right. I just like to show off my artistic and cartography skills. I'm showing off, I know. And you're impressed, aren't you? I'm going to draw the Confederacy. Now, can you imagine you see the coastline, Florida, and we got the Confederacy in the mind? So let me draw real quick. The Confederacy, right? Perfect, right? We all see it, correct? Here's Richmond. Here's Washington, D.C. They fight a battle right there. We got that, the wilderness. It's a draw. So now the attacking army of the Union want to get around and outflank them. They got to go to the next road junction, let's say right there. So they have to back up and go here. Make sense? What can the defending army do? What path can they take? Straight. Does that make sense? So let's say the next place. They got a shorter path. Interior lines give a great advantage to the defender. Not only because of the shorter lines, but as I put here, supply lines. The supply lines for the attacker get longer and they get shorter for the Confederates. So Lee is outnumbered and outgunned. The cream of his army has been killed at Gettysburg, yet they can hold out for months. There's a reason why Germany held out after the back of the German army was broken in 1943 by the Soviets. Their back was broken. Before American forces ever even really get into war in large numbers. Why did they fight on for almost 2 years? Interior made all the difference. So, and we'll see this in other wars. Wilderness, the march is on, and what's the next town? Last couple things for today. Spotsylvania. So the race is on for the next major road junction, Spotsylvania. The main fighting will be on the 12th, but actually be fighting for nearly a week along Spotsylvania. The Confederate Lee knew it and sent his armies marching as soon as they could. And because of interior lines, he was able to beat Union forces. Hear that too? By 3 hours. And what did they do when they got to? I think it's upstairs. 3 hours, they dug trenches. They dug trenches. Now, what's the worst part about fighting in a place like Spotsylvania? Blood-sucking vampires, right? We all know that. And what's out of blood-sucking vampires? Nobody. Vampires know no loyalty. I learned that the hard way. To give you an idea how bloody this battle is going to be, General Sedgwick, who was beloved by his men of his corps, they called him Uncle John. So they love him. They call him the Avuncular, like that. He wrote it, and he was as brave as you could get. And he saw his men ducking because Confederate snipers were taking pot shots at him at about 500 yards. Now, 500 yards in 1864, this is black powder musket. If you're firing a rifled musket at 500 yards, how do you have to aim? How do you have to point the gun? Yeah, about that. You have to shoot like a mortar. So they're not accurate at all. So you can see bullet, like dirt popping around. And his staff members are ducking. And he's kind of appalled by this. He was so brave. He led by example. And he wanted to show, don't run. Don't show the men you're scared. And so he said, men, you have nothing to fear. They could not hit an elephant at this distance. Right in the middle of distance, he was hitting. Right? And that will be just a precursor to how awful this battle is going to be. Which we'll do the awful battle tomorrow if we still have a school that hasn't blown away. Here's Sedgwick right here. It was, at least it was fast. I imagine the shot being I just cannot believe the year.
Yeah, we have one day.
Yeah, we get one day.
But at least it's halfway through, so they probably won't have to make up an additional like longer days. If this would have been like, before 11, we would have had to make up longer days. Or Saturdays. Rankin's a great choice. The problem with Rankin is I remember reading and I was like, Jim Rankin, a lot of people. It's a great choice. She's an amazing person. But look at her. Maybe parents would get Rankin, but I'm not celebrating for all my a lot of years.
Oh, I think I'll be yours.
Oh, my God. Make sure you still do it. Only problem is you need her. But if it doesn't say that, that's a great choice.
Something that she's eliminated. She wants to do it.
Just make sure and, but she voted against abortion, the first woman by. Yeah, she's kind of. Just check, but if it isn't. Good.
Okay.
So we must got just a flash. Let me look, I think he sent me a tag. You know, he sends me a message. And now with school being soon to be. It's. I know, I didn't get a message from him. No. But I think it's supposed to get a lot worse. And the things. So you want. Yeah, all of these. So they did just want to. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. So don't get one way.